She was calmly serving coffee in the briefing room until the Admiral called her by her secret call sign, and everyone froze. A true story. Nobody ever looked at her twice. That was the whole point. She walked into that building every morning with a contractor badge clipped to her chest, a plain Navy lanyard, and a coffee cart that she pushed with the same quiet efficiency as the day before and the day before that. She wore sensible shoes. She said good morning to the guards at the front desk. She knew everyone's name. She remembered how they took their coffee. Black, 2 sugars, 1 milk, nothing. She had it all memorized, and that alone made her easy to like. People who bring you exactly what you want without being asked become invisible fast. And invisible was exactly what she needed to be. Her name badge said Rena, just Rena. That was enough. For 11 months, she moved through one of the most secure naval command buildings on the east coast of the United States, and not a single person in that building, not the officers, not the guards, not the senior staff, had any idea who she really was. Here is the part that matters. There was a problem inside that building, a serious one. Sensitive information, the kind that should never leave a classified briefing room, was ending up in the wrong hands. Not all at once, not in one big leak that would be easy to trace. It was coming out slowly, in small pieces, like water through a crack in a wall. Someone inside the building was behind it, someone with access, someone who sat in briefings, shook hands, wore a uniform, and smiled at the right moments. The intelligence community knew there was a leak. They just did not know who. So they sent her in. Her real name does not appear in any document that has been made public. Her cover identity, Rena, civilian contractor, badge clearance level 2, was clean. There was paperwork, employment history, a reference contact, all of it real enough to hold up under a background check. She was placed inside the building to watch, to listen, to pick up on things that cameras could not catch and reports would never show. The kind of things you only notice when you are in the room, serving coffee, and people forget you are there. 11 months is a long time to pretend. She kept her eyes open and her mouth closed. She listened to conversations that were not meant to be overheard. She noticed which officers lingered after meetings ended. She noticed who made phone calls outside when they could have just as easily made them inside. She noticed patterns, small ones, the kind that most people dismiss as coincidence, and she filed them away. Every evening she passed her notes to a handler she never met in person. A drop location, a system that left no trail. She had one rule above everything else. No matter what happened inside that building, she would not break her cover. Not for anything. If someone spoke to her directly, she was Rena. If someone questioned her, she was Rena. If the building caught fire, she was Rena. Until she walked out the front door. By the time 10 months had passed, she had enough. She had a name. She had a pattern. She had documentation that pointed clearly to one of the 8 officers who attended the classified Thursday morning briefings. She had built the case quietly, piece by piece, and now she was in the final stretch. The investigation was almost complete. She just needed a few more days. On a Tuesday morning in November, she pushed her cart into the main briefing room, the same way she always did. 8 officers were already seated. The room was the way it always was before a briefing. A low hum of conversation, the shuffling of folders, someone checking a phone before putting it face down on the table. She moved along the side of the room, pouring the first round of coffee, not making eye contact, just doing what she always did, chair by chair, cup by cup. She was on the 3rd cup when the door opened. Admiral Garrison walked in without knocking, which was normal for him. He had been in the Navy for over 30 years. He walked into rooms like he owned them, because in most cases, he did. He was a large, quiet man, with the kind of stillness that made people nervous without knowing why. He did not raise his voice. He did not need to. He came through the door, and the room shifted the way rooms do when someone important enters. Officers straightened in their chairs. The low conversation stopped. He looked around once. A quick, practiced scan, and then he looked at her. Not at the room. At her. And then he said a word. One single word. Her call sign. Not her cover name. Not Rena. Her real operational call sign. The one that existed in a program with almost no paperwork. The one that fewer than a handful of people in the entire country were supposed to know. He said it clearly, without hesitation, in a normal voice, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. The room went silent. Not the polite silence before a briefing. Something else. Something heavier. 7 officers looked at each other, and then back at her, and you could almost see the moment it hit each of them. This woman who had been bringing their coffee for nearly a year was not who they thought she was. She did not freeze. She did not flinch. She did not look up in a way that confirmed anything, or denied anything. The coffee pot in her hand stayed level. She finished pouring the cup she had already started. She set the pot down on the cart, straightened it slightly, and then she looked at Admiral Garrison with an expression that gave away nothing at all. She said, in a voice nobody in that room had ever heard from her before, quieter, steadier, stripped of the pleasant contractor register she had used for 11 months. "The briefing should begin, sir." The Admiral nodded once. He took his seat. He said nothing further. He opened his folder, and the briefing began. One officer who was present in that room later said that in 30 years of naval service, including time spent in active conflict zones, that moment was the single most controlled thing he had ever seen one human being do. She had just been exposed, in front of 7 senior officers and a 2-star admiral, in a room inside a classified building, with no exit and no backup. And she had finished pouring the coffee. The investigation was over within 72 hours. One of the 8 officers who had been sitting in that room on Tuesday morning was quietly detained by Thursday. The evidence that had been built over 11 months, all of it collected by a woman pushing a coffee cart, was enough. 2 arrests followed. Classified material that had been passed to a foreign intelligence network was traced and recovered from a database overseas. The leak was sealed. She was out of the building before the week was done. Her contractor badge was deactivated at 11:42 on a Thursday night. By Friday morning, someone else was at the coffee station. Her name, Rena, was removed from the contractor records, which was easy because that name had never really existed. She left no trace, no forwarding address, no goodbye. She was just gone. The question that nobody could answer, and that nobody has been able to answer since, is how Admiral Garrison knew. Her call sign was not in any document he should have had access to. The program she worked under barely existed on paper. Her handler, when contacted years later through a third party, offered one sentence and nothing more. She held. The Admiral himself, in a brief internal statement given to the oversight committee that reviewed the operation afterward, said only, "I knew because it was necessary that I know." He never elaborated. No one pushed him to. There are a few theories. Some people who have studied the case believe the Admiral had a separate intelligence briefing before entering that room, that someone above both of them had decided it was time to close the operation, and that the call sign was the signal. Others believe he figured it out on his own, over months of small observations, and that what he did in that room was not an exposure, but a confirmation, a way of telling her that he knew, and that it was okay, and that she could stand down. A few people think the whole moment was deliberately planned as a message to whoever the leak was, a way of letting that person know the walls were closing in. None of these theories have ever been confirmed. What is known is what she left behind. The operation she ran became a case study, not for the arrest it led to, and not even for the intelligence she gathered. It became a case study for that one moment, that one decision, because the correct response, according to every training protocol that exists for operatives who find their cover blown mid-operation, is to exit immediately. You do not linger. You do not continue the task you were performing. You get out. She did not exit. She finished the pour. In the years that followed, her response in that moment was used in internal training for a reason that sounds simple, but is actually very hard to teach. It is the difference between a trained reaction and a real one. When someone calls your name in a room full of people who are not supposed to know your name, every part of your brain fires at once. The instinct is to react, to look up too fast, or to look away too deliberately, or to go still in a way that is its own kind of tell. The instinct is to do something. She did nothing. Or rather, she did the only thing that could not be questioned. She kept going. She finished what she was doing. And in that one small, quiet movement, she gave away absolutely nothing. The officers in that room signed non-disclosure agreements before they left the building that afternoon. 7 of them never spoke publicly about what they saw. One of them did, eventually. Years later, no longer in service and no longer bound by the agreement, he spoke briefly to a journalist working on a piece about intelligence operations that never made it to publication. He was asked what he remembered most about that morning. He thought about it for a while. Then he said, I have been in combat. I have sat across tables from people who intended to do a great deal of harm. I have seen men crack under very little pressure, and I have seen men hold under more pressure than most people could imagine. But I have never, not once in my entire career, seen anything like watching that woman finish pouring coffee after the Admiral said her name. I did not even understand at first what I had just witnessed. It took me a few seconds, and in those few seconds, she had already moved on to the next cup. He paused again. I think about that sometimes, he said. What it takes to be that person. Not the training, not the mission, not any of that. Just, what kind of person stays that still when everything is falling apart around them? I don't know. I genuinely don't know. But I know I'm not that person, and I know most people aren't. Her real name has never appeared in any public document. Her call sign has never appeared in any public document either. What is left is the image that has stayed with everyone who was in that room. A woman with a coffee pot, a cart with wheels that squeaked slightly on the left side, and the kind of stillness that most people spend a lifetime trying to find. She was there for 11 months. Nobody ever looked at her twice.